Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Catherine Watson with the Life After 50 show, and I'm here today with Cara Degado. We're going to be talking about a topic that I know you're going to want to tune in and listen to. So stay tuned, and we'll be talking in just a minute. But first, I want to introduce you to Find Houston Senior Care, because the Life After 50 show couldn't happen without the support and help from Find Houston Senior Care. Find Houston Senior Care is a web directory focused on the greater Houston area. So if you're looking for a home care company, or you're looking for a residential care home, or maybe you need a professional, or you just need information and help, Find Houston Senior Care has a wealth of resources for you. So we'd love to have you visit the website and tell us what you think. But now we're here today because I'm going to be talking to Cara Degado. She is with Home Instead Senior Care, and we're going to be talking about older adults, isolation, and loneliness. Now, this is a big topic right now, especially with the whole COVID thing that's going on. It's always been something that we had to concern ourselves with. Older adults typically have problems with loneliness and isolation, but now more than ever. So I'm grateful to have Cara here. She is an expert in her field. And Cara, I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would, please.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Catherine, for having me today. So, as Catherine said, I am with Home Instead Senior Care. I'm actually the owner of the North Houston Home Instead Senior Care office, and I've owned a Home Instead for about not quite 14 years. My background is in social work. I started at Methodist Hospital down in the Med Center quite some time ago when I was 25 years old. I grew up there. I've worked in acute care, acute rehab, home health, and really with seniors for the majority of my adult career, which has been about 30 years. I don't even like saying that out loud, but quite some time. So today we're talking, as Catherine said, about isolation and loneliness really as it relates to seniors. And it is a huge topic right now. There's a lot of information out there. So just thinking about the difference between the two, they often get used, those terms, interchangeably. And isolation really boils down to it's when an individual does not have enough people to interact with or visit with. Okay, so it's really more objective. It can be measured. And loneliness is really more of a feeling of distress over really not having social relationships or enough contact with people. So it's a bit more subjective. It's that feeling of distress. People who are isolated, socially isolated, they may not feel lonely. People who have large families and large social networks can feel lonely. So again, one is more objective and measurable, the other is more subjective. So in terms of, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for some people, they like to be not necessarily isolated, but they thrive better in a quiet environment than other people.
Sure.
For instance, I can sit all day long on my computer and be perfectly happy, not talking to anybody, Now, I can't do this for days and days on end because
Right.
we're humans. Humans are social beings, and we've got to connect with other people. Right. And I do have a husband that is in the house, so I'm not totally isolated. I think it's a big difference.
Absolutely.
My sister lives by herself. She's almost 80. And to not have that contact has been really difficult for her.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a
Catherine, we've done a few of these things together, and you know how I love my statistics, right? So the Kaiser Family Foundation has done some studies, and 43% of seniors basically report feeling lonely pretty much on a regular basis. So it's a big issue when it comes to our senior population, and there are some pretty significant health impacts. If we want to move to the next point. So the impacts of isolation and loneliness, there's more research coming, but there's still not enough. But what we do know is that it can lead to people having low energy and just not feeling motivated, a lack of motivation, and kind of brain fog, if you will. It can lead to sleep issues, not being able to fall asleep or waking up and not being able to stay asleep. Lots of issues when it comes to health. There is a 29% increase in heart disease as a result of loneliness, and 32% increase in the risk of stroke as a result of loneliness.
I didn't know that.
So some pretty significant impacts, if you will. And I think there's a 32% increase in the mortality rate as a result of loneliness. So, it's definitely something, we want to pay attention to and try to address when we can. There are risk factors also that put, people at risk for having these physical. So really, I guess you can think of the impacts in terms of physical and also mental health issues, right? So the physical things are going to be aches and pains, anxiety, maybe a little, paranoia, panic attacks. The interesting thing about that is it could be related to dementia. It could be signs of depression. So, it's not a real clear-cut way to determine, is this a result of loneliness, or is this a little bit more serious, maybe depression, if you will.
Right. And depression and dementia have been linked as well. I've read numerous studies on the linking of those two. Kind of like the chicken and the egg thing. Which came first? Was it the dementia or was it the depression?
Right.
It's a link.
And I think in the medical community, there's really not a standard for screening for things like loneliness and isolation, and so that's one challenge we have on the medical side and in the medical community. I think about my father-in-law, and interesting that we're doing this show today. So he actually died on Saturday.
Sorry.
And it's okay. He was 90, and I just believe he's at peace and in a much better place. But for 5.5 months, we were not able to visit because he was in an assisted living. And so I really see this situation with him in particular as I say he's a secondary casualty of COVID, because family was not allowed to visit. And in talking to some of the staff over that time, they did report a decline in his physical, he lost weight. He stopped engaging as much in some of the activities that they were offering. And so, we saw it in terms of his mental health, but also physically, he declined and lost a significant amount of weight. And so, at 90, that can happen, but I do believe in my heart that was a result of just not seeing his family,
I totally agree. And that is probably, to me, the worst thing about this whole COVID situation is the inability for families to see one another with our senior community. They're just not able to have that connection that I think is so vital and so necessary for people to thrive. And that's what we want people to do, is thrive. Yeah.
So, just in thinking of some high risk things to look for, people who live alone, people who never married, widowed, divorced, major life changes, loss of a spouse, that can be a high risk factor. Maybe recent retirement, so leaving the workforce, that can be, that major life change can lead to these feelings of isolation and loneliness. We may also see some other barriers like communication barriers, the inability to hear, so hearing loss, language barriers. That can certainly lead to isolation and loneliness. And then there's certainly some societal barriers. So if people in minority groups may feel left out, right? And so there's a lot of high risk factors in there. Living in a rural area, obviously you may feel less connected to people and more isolated. I'm trying to think of some other high risk categories, just not participating in any kind of social groups, church, And
right now, people are not able to participate, at least not in person. And some of our seniors may not be real technologically savvy enough to do the Zoom calls. Some of them are, and some of them are getting that benefit, and that is helping some. It's not the same as in person. It never will be the same as in person. For one thing, and I was talking to my sister the other day, and she lives alone, it's the lack of touch. She said, I miss touch. She says, there's nobody to touch me. There's nobody to hug me. And, that's a big issue for a lot of people. Human touch is just, it's just our DNA. It's part of who we are. That's what makes us human. And I think it's important that we honor that and understand that's part of it. But, what do we do, Cara? What do we do?
Well, I want to cover a couple more symptoms or warning signs. So if you see a loss of appetite, a loss of or gain in weight, loss of weight, maybe you're seeing an increase in consumption of alcohol. So some concerns maybe about substance abuse. Difficulty driving or just not being able to drive, that is certainly a warning sign that somebody could potentially easily start to feel lonely and isolated because they can't get out and do the kinds of things that they used to do. Again, COVID has made that more complicated. Some environmental cues might be spoiled food in the refrigerator, maybe an unkempt house. I hear that a lot with our clients. Mom just always kept her house spotless. And now we're seeing clutter and bills piling up. Again, that can also be a sign of some early signs of dementia and just not having that ability to get certain tasks done like they once did.
And again, the depression. The depression. Absolutely. And the loneliness. I saw that. That was one of the first clues with my mother-in-law, because she always kept a spick and span house. And I started noticing that not only was it not spick and span, but there was stuff piled up. And I mean, it was just totally out of character for her. And it was, she had lost her husband. She was suddenly by herself at the house. She was starting to have a little bit of dementia problems. So her memory wasn't as well, which caused problems with her friends. And they started kind of shoving her to the side. She was no longer invited to the bridge games and the mahjong games because she couldn't keep up with the crowd. And she became very lonely and isolated and depressed, and all of that together. Like I said, I don't know which came first, the dementia or the depression, but they were hand in hand.
And sometimes that people will take themselves out of those social activities because they know in the early stages they are having a hard time tracking conversations. It could be a hearing loss issue as well. I mean,
I hadn't thought of that. That's a great,
it's
that's something
complicated.
definitely to think about. Yes.
I think that's why it's so important that people have regular checkups with their physician so they can kind of rule out some of these things and maybe get some help like a hearing aid. That can certainly help. We're going through that with my father right now. He just cannot hear. But I think we're also seeing, because of that, he's pulling back a little bit and not interacting. I think that can sort of accelerate any dementia. And that's another thing. This loneliness and isolation does lead to an increased risk of developing dementia as well. Yeah. So you asked, what can people do? Well, it is challenging right now, but I can tell you that it's important that people try to maintain the relationships they have, build new relationships. If you can help teach them and get them involved in some sort of social media. But what we do know is that connections decrease the mortality rate by 50%. So I think it's important to just try whatever we can to keep folks engaged and having some social interactions. So there are lots of resources out there. And one that I really like, it's really through AARP, the AARP Foundation. It's called Connect to Affect. And that has some really great resources on there. And I want to recommend that people really...
I'm going to put that up. So it's
connecttoaffect.org. And again, that's through AARP's Foundation. There's also tell me when you're ready.
Yep.
There we go.
I've got connecttoaffect.org, and there's no spaces in between connect and to an effect.
Right.
So this will go on the podcast later. So again, that's connect, CONNECTTOAFFECT.org for my podcast listeners.
Great. And there's also a site called Campaign to End Loneliness.
Oh, I like that.
It's actually started in the UK, of all places, but lots of ways to get involved.
Say that again,
Campaign to End Loneliness. So, Catherine, going back to the first resource.
Or .org?
.org. That while you still have connecttoaffect.org. So one of the things I really like about that first site, the connecttoaffect.org, they have an assessment tool on there, and people can do a self-assessment, or families can help work through that assessment with their senior loved one. And so just real quickly, there's a kind of 3 questions you can ask to get a sense of, how serious is this isolation and loneliness? The first question is, how often do you feel a lack of companionship? Mm-hmm. The second question is, how often do you feel left out? Okay. And then thirdly, how often do you feel isolated from others? And those are just kind of quick questions you can ask to determine, how serious is this? But if you go to that website, it's a 2-page assessment tool that I really like. And it's real simple, and I think it's a great tool for folks. So,
and then the second one?
Campaign to End Loneliness, and that was started in the UK. That's a way of connecting, maybe even volunteering to reach out to isolated or lonely seniors. Another resource, the nationalservice.gov. So that was an organization started as a result of 1990 National Service Act or something like that, but lots of good information there, ways to get involved, volunteer. which is obviously harder during COVID, but people might get some ideas on how to connect online. And then the National Association of Area Agency on Aging. So their actual website is www.n4a.org. N4a.org.
And actually, you don't have to put the www anymore. You can just put the n4a.org into your.
Stands for the National Association of Area Agencies on Aging. So some really great resources.
They have a lot of resources. They have local chapters or local offices that can help you with local resources in your area, right?
Yes, exactly. And the nationalservice.gov, they have some local community resources as well. The other one that is Meals on Wheels. But right now with COVID, I'm not exactly sure how they're managing their mission, but I'm pretty sure it's changed quite a bit. You know, that used to serve as a touch point for people who were, you know, sort of homebound and socially isolated. Unfortunately, that's not happening anymore to the extent. But when we get back to normal or whatever, you know, we can get out and about, Meals on Wheels is a great resource, great way to volunteer.
Are they still delivering meals at all, Cara? Do you know?
I think they are, but I think it's scaled back. You know what? I really need to check on that because with, you know, if people are masking up, they may be able to do, they may be ramping that back up. But
if anybody is listening to this broadcast right now and knows the answer to that question, please put it in the comments below and I'll pop it on the screen if we're still live. If we've already gone off and you're watching the replay, go ahead and put that resource in the comments so that people will know. That's something I thought about it and I keep thinking, oh, I need to check on that. And I haven't done so. So I can't imagine that they would completely stop it because a lot of seniors rely on those meals. You know?
It seems like I heard somewhere during this whole pandemic that they've just scaled back. So maybe somebody who got meals daily or getting them 2 times a week, things like that. I think one of the big challenges for a lot of these organizations, Catherine, is that they're not for profits. And so their fundraising has probably been drastically cut and impacted. And so that is going to have an impact on the end result of their mission and their ability to carry that mission out.
And a lot of their the people that did the delivery of the Meals on Wheels were seniors themselves.
Yep.
Like my sister worked with an organization similar to Meals on Wheels up in Kingwood, and she can't really get out there and expose herself to deliver this stuff. So there's so many. Oh goodness, this COVID. I'm ready for it to be over with. How about you?
I gotta tell you, I'm pretty tired of it.
I think we're all over it.
And having said that, I know for certain that there's a lot that I can be grateful for. And I think in terms of negative feelings and negative thoughts, which certainly can lead us to feeling lonely or isolated. For me, gratitude. It is just practicing some sort of daily gratitude helps me, and it gets my mind in the right, mindset, or gets me in the right mindset, and just trying to really remember. I have much to be grateful for. There are so many folks that are suffering in ways I can't even comprehend. So
I agree. I try to end my day with 5 things that I'm grateful for. I have a little journal by my bed, and it helps me to sleep better.
Yeah.
Because especially when this first began, I was having a lot of anxiety. I was waking up at night. I was, just thoughts going through my head. And when I started doing that again, and I used to practice it forever, and you know how you get out of the habit of things sometimes.
Sure.
I got back in the habit. It made such a difference. And I find that I'm much more relaxed. I sleep better and I wake up feeling better.
So I practicing some sort of journaling, maybe encouraging your senior loved ones to write things down, use social media, schedule regular calls with your senior loved ones. There's also, Catherine, a device out there called GrandPad.
Oh, I love GrandPad. I
Right.
love it. We got one for my mother-in-law. It was wonderful.
They're simple to use, and it's very timely right now. Because you can connect. You can upload photos. There's radio stations, so you can play big band or their favorite music.
And they're only connected to people that you choose to be connected. So it's not like they're out there in the wild, wild web, getting into trouble and getting hooked up with scammers. No, you set it up and you decide, okay, this is the limited, they only need to be connected to their really close friends and family.
That's right. And you can set them up as a companion, and they can do video calls with you, things like that.
Right.
I have to tell you, Catherine, that Home Instead Senior Care does have GrandPads.
Oh,
so it's a fairly new initiative for me, but I do have some GrandPads that we are launching and getting out to some of our clients, those that are in more rural areas and isolated. Maybe they have family out of state. And so we are ramping that up and starting probably the end of this week and next week, we're going to have, several GrandPads in the homes of our clients. But you don't have to sign up with a home care company to get a GrandPad, as you probably discovered on your own. So I would encourage people, just Google GrandPad and maybe buy one for your senior loved one, because those are a great way to connect, especially with risk of exposure to COVID, or if you live out of town or out of state and you just can't be there. That's a great way to connect and make it a little more personal than just a phone call. You can actually see your loved one through video chats.
And you can regularly send them pictures. You can text them over pictures so that they can stay connected with you.
Yep, you can use it for email, I think texting, but yes, photos, video chats, music. There's actually an activity of the day that people can tap into. So that's one thing we'll be using with our caregivers. We will encourage them every single day you're in that home, go into, log into GrandPad and pull up the activity of the day. And we can actually track it through our, like a dashboard, how many times have they done an activity of the day for the week. So it's a pretty neat tool, very timely, but it's a great tool for families to, if they want to connect through video chat, very easy to use. So we often don't think our seniors can manage technology. And I'm here to tell you that's really not always true. In many cases, it's very easy for the seniors to learn how to use some of the new technology.
And for some reason, the pads, they've always gravitated to the pads to work better. They're a little bit bigger than a phone, so a pad seems to be great. They can hold it in their hands and it just works great. I remember the first time we set up a video call for my mother-in-law with her brother, who lives up in Richmond, Virginia, and she hadn't seen him in a long time. And I mean, she was just so amazed, she had no idea. And she kept saying, "That's Sonny. He's talking to me." And I'm like, "Yeah, talk back to him."
How cute. How funny. Well, it's particularly easy if you have a caregiver in the home that can help the senior with it. And so for our purposes, the services of home care, having a caregiver help that senior, navigate the GrandPad, but it's really pretty simple. So
they're pretty simple, but like my mother-in-law, she had some dementia. She couldn't remember what to do with it. And so the caregiver would help her and set it up, you want to listen to music now, Pat? Let's set it up. Let's put your earphones on and you can listen to music. Let's pull up your emails and see who sent you an email today.
Yeah.
And we, try to get all of the family members engaged and say, okay, everybody, send one email a day or one every 2 days. What can you commit to and stick with it? Because she's going to really look for those. We love mail. Most people have always loved mail. I still go out to the mailbox. What's in the mailbox? Usually it's just junk or somebody trying to sell me something. But, you just want that connection that mail gives. And the email's the same way. So that's a great way to help families stay connected.
Sure.
So home care, let's talk just a little bit about that, Cara, because I think it's important for people to understand that they don't have to hire a home care company to come in every single day of the week for 8 hours a day. They can hire you for short periods of time, a couple of days a week, just to give a little bit more of that one-on-one interaction and how important that is. So talk to us about home care a little bit.
Well, you're spot on. I think oftentimes people think of home care as 24/7, and it really isn't most of the time that we're in the home that many hours in a week. I like to encourage people to think about it as maybe transitional. So you've got a loved one coming out of the hospital. The last thing we want is for them to have to return to the hospital and have a readmission. So maybe having a concentrated number of days of having a caregiver and home care in the home during that transition back home from a hospital discharge, right? Mm-hmm. Another way to look at it, as you pointed out, is just 2 days a week. So I often use the example of my own mother-in-law. So we relocated her and my father-in-law from New Mexico. It would have been 4 years this past February. Now she died, 2 years ago, April. Mm-hmm. He went to memory care and an assisted living when we moved him here, and then she went to a regular assisted living. She had macular degeneration, and she had a lot of issues with broken bones because of her osteoporosis and had broken her left femur. In spite of that, she could still stand on that good leg and transfer herself in and out of bed, on and off the commode. She could even dress herself. The problem really with her, I do think she was lonely. And I think she felt socially isolated because of her lack of vision. Yeah, macular degeneration. So it didn't matter how many activities they offered. It was hard for her to participate because of her eyesight. So what was happening, Catherine, is she was calling family members and friends 10 and 12 times a day, alienating people. She never realized that people have caller ID and they could see how many times she was calling. And so she's a retired school teacher. Mm-hmm. And so these are not, one challenge. Not everyone can manage the cost of home care. I get that. I totally get that. And being a social worker by background, I understand some of those challenges. In terms of your planning, a lot of it does come down to the financial, impact and situation. With her, we got her a caregiver 2 days a week. Mm-hmm. And the caregiver would just come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they'd go out to the grocery store to buy, snacks and things. They'd go to a Goodwill and just, entertain her. The caregiver did her laundry. The caregiver also helped her with a bath, as opposed to the care staff in the assisted living. She preferred that because it was always the same person. And it wasn't always the same person at the assisted living. In any case, the phone calls, 10, 12 phone calls a day, stopped. Also, when we visited, we didn't have to take her to the grocery store or do her laundry. We didn't ever do the bathing, but it really, the peace of mind it brought us, and just the ability to, when we were there visiting, we were able to just be her family and not have to do the grocery shopping or the laundry. And it just really improved the quality of our visits. So, she was surrounded by people in the facility, but I think she was still very lonely and felt isolated because of her eyesight. So, just another example of how having that extra set of hands, a caregiver going in 2 days a week, fairly manageable in terms of cost. And so always encourage people to think about that as opposed to, daily care. That certainly can add up.
Right, right. And if you know somebody's going to come every Tuesday and every Thursday, you look forward to that. And then it frees up the family. Like you said, suddenly she's not calling them 10 or 12 times a day. And so they feel more comfortable calling her because they're not afraid they're going to be stuck on the phone for hours now because she's lonely. I mean, that is a classic sign of loneliness, if ever I heard of one, is when somebody is calling you multiple times a day. That's a big, big red flag for me that says something's going on here and this person needs some help. And if you, as the family, can't provide all of the help that they need, then you've got to find another way, and bringing in home care, if you can afford it, for even just a day or two a week is going to make a huge difference in everybody's life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Carol, we could probably talk for the next 2 hours on this. There is so much to talk about, but you have given us a wealth of information, and I really appreciate that. I want to put your website up. I've put it up a couple of times, but I want to put it up again. And is there any other way that you want people to connect with you? Do you want me to put up a phone number or anything?
You can certainly put the office phone number up there.
Okay.
We are available, answer our phones 24/7. If it's not an emergency, we do like for folks to call during office hours, but we also understand that when you're dealing with seniors, often people find themselves in a crisis and haven't made a plan, and then now they're forced to come up with a plan. So that phone number, do you have that available, or do you need me to?
Nope, go ahead and give it to me, please.
281-440-5160.
And if you would just repeat that for the podcast listeners.
Sure.
And I'm going to put it up on the screen.
281-440-5160. And that's Homestead Senior Care out of North Houston.
Yes. And it costs nothing to talk to Cara or her team members. They'll do an assessment at no charge to assess your situation and make recommendations. And again, Cara, as you've seen, is a wealth of knowledge. She's got a lot of years of experience. She knows where to send you. She can be a resource to help you get the help that you need. And I know Cara, she's got heart. And that's why she's on the show today, because she's got heart. I only bring people with heart on.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us again. I really appreciate it. And one more time, I'm going to put the website up. And we're got to go, unfortunately, but we'll have you back on the show another time. So thanks again for being here.
I look forward to it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everybody have a great day.